All right, so today we're diving into this pretty crazy story. It's about Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Well, this is going to be good.
But here's the twist. It's not the opposition gunning for him this time. This is about rumblings within his own Liberal Party.
Yeah, and these aren't, just quiet murmurs behind closed doors or anything. These are straight up calls for his resignation. And they're coming from members of his own party, his own MPs.
I know, it's wild, right? And we're not just talking about a few disgruntled voices. There have been these, secret meetings, heated debates. They've even given the Prime Minister a deadline. It's like a political thriller in real life.
It really shows you how much unrest there is within the Liberal Party right now. I mean, think about it. These are people who were elected under the Liberal banner. They've worked alongside Trudeau. For them to get to this point, something big must be going on.
Okay, so let's back up a bit for some context. The Liberals haven't exactly been super popular lately. Their poll numbers have been dropping. And at the same time, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is gaining ground.
Right, and then you add in the fact that the next election is coming up. You can practically feel the pressure mounting. Some Liberal MPs are looking at the situation and thinking, is Trudeau really the guy to lead us to victory? Poilievre's got this momentum going, and they're starting to wonder if maybe a change at the top is what they need.
And then boom, all of this tension comes to a head during this closed-door meeting of Liberal MPs. Can you imagine being in that room? You've got 24 MPs who have already signed a document demanding Trudeau's resignation.
Yeah, that detail about Trudeau getting emotional, especially when he talked about his kids seeing those F. Trudeau signs. That's telling, It shows just how much pressure he's under, the toll this is taking on him, not just politically, but personally, too. It's not just about policies anymore. It's about his legacy, his family.
It's a reminder that behind all the politics, there are real people involved. People grappling with some really tough decisions.
Absolutely. And that human element often gets lost in all the political noise. It's important to remember these are real people facing real consequences.
So after this explosive meeting, things don't exactly calm down. Liberal MPs are reacting in all sorts of ways. Some are calling for unity, saying they need to put aside their differences and focus on beating the Conservatives in the election.
Right. That's pretty typical in these situations. When there's this kind of infighting that could hurt the party's goals, there's always that push to present a united front. It's a way to shift the attention away from the internal problems and try to project an image of strength.
That makes sense. But it's not all calls for unity. Some MPs are expressing serious concerns. One even said, this has been brewing for a while now and it's important for people to get it off their chests. Another one said, the Prime Minister needs to listen to the frustrations of his colleagues, and in some cases, they're totally valid frustrations, and he needs to make some changes.
Yeah, these comments are interesting. They suggest that this isn't just a sudden outburst, like a one-time thing. It sounds like these concerns have been building for a while, like they've been bubbling under the surface until they finally boiled over.
And here's where it gets even more interesting. Remember those MPs who are calling for Trudeau to resign? Well, they gave him a deadline, October 28th. That's the day they want him to decide what he's going to do.
Wow. They're really turning up the heat, especially considering that the Liberal Party doesn't really have a clear process for removing a leader who doesn't want to go.
Yeah, so what happens if Trudeau just ignores the deadline? What can they really do?
It's like they're playing chicken, They're betting that Trudeau will do what they think is best for the party, even if it means stepping down.
This whole thing really highlights how complicated power dynamics can be within a political party. On one hand, you have the leader who's supposed to set the direction, but then you have the MPs who represent their constituents, and they have a duty to speak up when they think things are going in the wrong direction.
It's a tricky balance for sure, and it's not just a Canadian thing. You see these power struggles in political parties all over the world.
It reminds us that even in parties that seem united from the outside, there are often disagreements and different visions for the future simmering below the surface.
Absolutely, and those tensions can erupt at any time, especially when the stakes are high. And with an election on the horizon, the stakes are definitely high right now.
Okay, so now let's zoom in on some of the individual MPs who have been especially critical of Trudeau. These are people who are putting their political careers on the line by speaking out. People like Sean Casey and Wayne Long.
Yeah, it takes a lot of courage to do that, to challenge your own party leader publicly. It suggests they believe things are really bad enough to risk their own careers. They're putting their principles and their beliefs ahead of their own ambitions.
Which leads to the big question. Is this just a temporary crisis for Trudeau? Something he can overcome? Or is this a sign of a deeper problem within the Liberal Party? To figure that out, we need to understand how Canadian politics works and what's going on inside the Liberal Party. So let's take a closer look at the options Trudeau has and what this push against him could mean.
Let's dig in. What makes this whole thing even trickier is that there's not really a clear-cut way to get rid of a leader in the Liberal Party if they don't want to go.
Yeah, it's not like they can just vote him out or something. So what are their options here?
Well, some people have been talking about the Reform Act. It was used to kick out the former Conservative leader Erin O'Toole back in 2022.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. That was all about giving regular party members more power.
Yeah, exactly. Think of it like a fire alarm that MPs can pull if they think the leader's messing up. If enough of them sign a petition wanting a leadership review, it triggers a vote. And if the majority votes against the leader, they're out of there.
So couldn't they just do that with Trudeau, get enough signatures and force him out?
There's a catch. The Reform Act doesn't just automatically apply. Parties have to vote to adopt it after each election. And the Liberals have never done that.
Oh, wow. So that's not an option then.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so what about other rules in the Liberal Party? Anything else they could use?
There's this thing called a leadership endorsement ballot.
Yeah.
Basically, it lets registered Liberal Party members say whether they still support the leader, but it only happens if the party loses a general election.
So it's like a post-mortem after a defeat.
Yeah, exactly.
Not very helpful right now.
Nope.
So these MPs who want Trudeau out are kind of stuck. They gave him that deadline, but there's no way to make him follow it.
It all comes down to Trudeau now. He has to decide if he's going to give in or fight to stay in power.
This whole situation really shows how complicated things can be inside a political party. You've got the leader who's supposed to be in charge, but then you've got the MPs who have to represent the people who voted for them.
It's a delicate balance. And it happens everywhere, not just in Canada.
It shows that even in parties that seem united, there are often disagreements bubbling under the surface.
Definitely. And those disagreements can explode at any time, especially when the stakes are high.
And with an election coming up, the stakes are definitely high. We've been focusing on all the politics and deadlines, but I think it's important to step back and look at the bigger picture. What does all this drama in the Liberal Party tell us about what Canadians are thinking?
That's a great point. I think it shows that there's a lot of unease out there, maybe even some Trudeau fatigue. He's been in charge for almost a decade, and that optimism and progressive stuff might not be working for everyone anymore.
And then there's Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. He's getting more popular. He's got a very different style.
He's definitely a factor. I think the Liberal MPs who want Trudeau gone are worried about him. They see him as a real threat, and they don't think Trudeau can beat him.
So what do you think will happen with this October 28th deadline coming up?
Hard to say for sure. Trudeau is a tough guy politically. He's been through a lot. He might just try to wait it out, hope that the people in his party who are upset will calm down. And then he can focus on beating Poilievre in the election. But there's a real chance that the pressure from his own party could get too strong. If more MPs come out against him publicly, or if the ones who are already speaking out get even louder, it might be impossible for him to stay in charge.
It's like a high-stakes poker game. Trudeau and his opponents are trying to outsmart each other.
And the prize is huge. The future of the Liberal Party. Maybe even the future of Canada.
Let's think about regular Canadians for a second. What does all this Liberal Party drama mean for them?
Well, this isn't just some political game. It has real consequences for people's lives. If Trudeau steps down or is forced out, the Liberal Party has to choose a new leader. And that could change everything in Canadian politics. A new leader could have completely different priorities. And that could affect the economy, healthcare, Canada's place in the world.
And even if Trudeau stays, the problems in his party aren't just going to disappear.
Exactly. And don't forget about Poilievre and the Conservatives. They're watching all this very closely, waiting for a chance to use it to their advantage.
It's a crazy time in Canadian politics.
Yeah, the stakes are incredibly high. The decisions made in the next few weeks and months could change Canada forever.
We'll definitely keep following this story. And we'll be back to break it all down for you right here on The Deep Dive.
Until then, stay informed and remember sometimes the most interesting things are happening right under our noses.
You know, we've talked a lot about the political side of things, the deadlines, the strategies, but what really gets me are the stories of these MPs who are risking their careers to go up against Trudeau.
It really shows you how strong their beliefs are.
Yeah, they're not just playing along. They're taking a stand for what they think is right, even though it could backfire big time.
It's a powerful example of sticking to your principles.
Absolutely, and I think it's so important to hear their stories.
Yeah.
It reminds us that there are real people behind all the political drama. People with strong convictions who are driving this whole thing.
You're right. It's easy to forget that when you're talking about strategies and power plays, that these aren't just politicians moving pieces around a board. They truly believe that Trudeau needs to go for the good of the party and the country.
Like Sean Casey, for instance. He's a Liberal MP who hasn't been shy about calling for Trudeau to step down. He even said that he wished there was a secret ballot so they could vote on Trudeau's leadership.
Wow, that's a bold move. He could really get in trouble for saying that.
Right. It shows you how strongly he feels about this. And then there's Wayne Long, another MP who's been very critical of Trudeau. He signed that letter demanding Trudeau's resignation. And he said that he thinks the Liberal Party needs a new leader.
And both Casey and Long have made it clear that this isn't personal. They honestly believe that Trudeau's leadership is hurting the Liberal Party and preventing them from dealing with the issues that Canadians care about.
It's really impressive that they're willing to speak out like this.
It tells you they think the stakes are incredibly high.
It makes you wonder what it means for democracy when elected officials feel like they have to challenge their own leader.
It's a question that goes beyond this specific situation. It's about accountability and whether people in the system can speak up when things are wrong.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the chaos in the Liberal Party, the question that keeps coming back to me is this just a temporary problem for Trudeau? Or is it a sign of something bigger? A real change happening in Canadian politics?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Only time will tell. But one thing's for sure, this whole thing has exposed some serious tensions within the Liberal Party and in Canada as a whole.
Yeah, tensions between loyalty and doing what's right, between wanting stability and needing change.
And how those tensions play out will have a big impact on Canada's future.
Absolutely.
So to everyone listening, as you keep following this story, I encourage you to think about the motivations of the people involved, what might happen because of what they do, and what it all means for Canada.
Because at the end of the day, we all have a role to play in shaping our country's future.
That's all for our deep dive this week. Thanks for listening.